Well, thank you. My portion on the program is to talk to you about pesticides and pesticide stewardship, particularly in the high tunnel. And my first comment is going to be it's complicated. And that's just because there are some restrictions with certain pesticides that we can use on crops in the field that are prohibited in the greenhouse. There may be pesticides that we can use in the field, and we can't use that particular pesticide in the high tunnel or greenhouse, but a similar pesticide with the same active ingredient may be labeled in the high tunnel and greenhouse and not labeled in the field. So it is complicated. I'm going to say something that's very, very unpopular, but you have to read the pesticide labels. It comes down to that. And in particular, when you want to use pesticides in the high tunnel is considered a greenhouse, and the EPA considers it a greenhouse. And so where you see greenhouse restrictions or greenhouse uses on the label, that also includes high tunnels. You cannot consider the high tunnel a field use of a pesticide. So where do you look on the pesticide label to see these restrictions? It's going to be in the directions for use section of the pesticide label, and there's usually a section for restrictions in that. It's a long ways before you see the actual crop by crop recommendations. So you need to look at those portions of the label. So check those labels. When you buy a new product, if you replenish a pesticide that you've used up, you need to check the label again. These labels change. I may recommend a particular pesticide today. Tomorrow, it may have a new label. And what we've seen is those restrictions come and go on some of those labels with the new versions. We ran into an instance where someone used something in a greenhouse. We didn't think it was permitted. I had a different version of the label. The person who sold them the product had even a different version of the label, and we were dealing with 3 versions of the label. It all came down to what the label was that the grower had in hand. So check the labels. When you buy new products, check them again. Another aspect that's in the high tunnel has to do with worker protection standards. That's another big issue. We need to protect ourselves. We need to protect our employees that may be exposed to pesticide residues. In a high tunnel, there's actually a greater chance of pesticide residues just because we're applying pesticides in an enclosed area. We don't have that air circulation that we would have outdoors. One of the big differences with worker protection standards has to do with notification of workers. And in the field, we do have to post fields and notify workers when we have an REI over 48 hours. In the high tunnel, if you have an REI over 4 hours, you need to notify your workers. And so it's very careful that we keep track of those REIs and make sure we adhere to the worker protection standards and notify our workers so we can help keep them safe. An additional issue we have in the high tunnel with pesticides is the potential for phytotoxicity. Plants grow differently in the high tunnel. Their leaves are often a lot thinner than they would be in a field situation. And it's always good when you're trying new combinations of products, where you're trying new products in the greenhouse, test those on a few plants, wait 48 hours just to make sure you're not getting any burning or phytotoxicity. Particularly with flowering plants, a lot of flowers are particularly more susceptible to phytotoxicity from some pesticides. So it's always careful to test things out, make sure you have confidence with the plants you're growing, the varieties you're using, and the stages they're in when you're using new pesticides in the greenhouse. So the question was, do they need to look at, or do they need to read the label of the pesticide they have in hand? And the answer is yes. And even if they get a new bottle of the same product, it doesn't hurt to check that label again, because I have seen many, many instances where the labels just change from year to year as they're reissued by the EPA. EPA is going through a process where we're going to see all pesticide labels changed in the next decade or so, and that is to make pesticides compliant with the Endangered Species Act, which is a huge issue right now with the federal government. What that means is they're going to relook at all pesticide labels, and there may be numerous changes in that. So read your pesticide labels. Don't listen to what I say. Follow the guidelines on the label. That is the best, because I may be working with an old label, and so they need to follow what is written on the label of the product they are using. That is my best advice.